Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
Hey, it's Heather, I said, holding the phone between my shoulder and ear while tweaking the latest design changes on my screen. It was another busy Thursday afternoon at work. Over the weekend, the clients had made a bunch of last-minute updates to the plans, and, as usual, I was left to clean up the chaos. "Hi, it's me," my wife, Andrew, said, sounding a little off, though I brushed it off as her having a tough day. "Just checking, what time do you think you'll be home tonight?" This kind of call wasn't out of the ordinary. She liked to keep things organized and make sure our schedules stayed on track. "I'm not sure," I mumbled distractedly as I continued to manipulate the CAD program. "Ruth handed me a bunch of last-minute changes to the Thompson project, and we need to get them to the contractor by tonight. If everything goes right, we should be done in a couple of hours, but don't hold dinner for me. If it gets too late, I'll have Michael order in for us," I sighed internally. My boss's penchant for throwing unexpected late nights at me had caused more than a few disagreements between Andrew and me. I'm an architect for a firm that specializes in large commercial developments. About 4 years ago, I had been promoted to project manager, which meant a nice salary increase but also more responsibility and the likelihood of longer hours. There are times, like today, when I have to drop everything to finish a rush job. Timing can be critical. Any delays in getting the plans to the builders could result in severe performance penalties to the firm and my bank balance. My firm did not look kindly on project managers who didn't deliver. The problem was that there was often little or no warning on these rush projects. It didn't help matters that the last couple of years had been tougher than usual. My team was a victim of its own success. We had successfully pulled off a series of jobs for tough, demanding clients, and as a result, we gained a reputation for getting the job done. It seemed like every demanding client that came to our firm was now asking specifically for us to be assigned to their project. Consequently, I've had to deal with a succession of picky clients with lots of last-minute changes. Even when the demands were unreasonable, my boss would expect that they be met. Privately, he would agree that the client was being outrageous, but publicly, he told me to do my job. I suppose he was persuaded by the fact that the firm made the clients pay through the nose for each annoyance they put my team through. So, my team was earning great bonuses and lots of respect, but the hours were killing us. I'm the type of guy who likes to spend time with my family and be involved in my kids' lives. Just last week, I put my foot down and told my boss that things had to change. The extra hours were affecting team performance, and I was in danger of losing some of my best people if things didn't change. He reluctantly agreed, and we set up a meeting to discuss the creation of more reasonable deadlines. I wasn't exactly sure why Andrew was so bothered by my overtime. Hell, she put in a ton of hours at her job too, and I never complained. Well, not too much. Andrew was a financial analyst. I knew there would be times when she had to put in extra hours. We both knew that the extra hours came with extra responsibility and more money in the paycheck. We had learned to work around it, and we both made sure not to let the job get in the way of our family time. But the carping had been getting worse. "I'm sure Michael will give you anything you want," Andrew responded sarcastically. "Try to make it home before midnight. We have things to discuss." I mumbled a hasty goodbye before turning my attention back to the computer. In hindsight, I missed the clues in her tone. I had only given her part of my attention because I needed to get this job done. I was in a rush to finish up and get home. I probably should have paid more attention to what she was saying, or perhaps, more importantly, how she said it. It was only later that I realized the phone call had been a classic no-win situation. If I had stopped working and taken the time to talk with her, it would have taken longer to get the job done, and she would have been upset because I was later getting home. But by hurrying through the conversation in a distracted fashion, she felt slighted. No matter how I responded, I confirmed her fears about my priorities. It wasn't the best way to start the worst evening of my life. Andrew knew I had tuned her out, and she hated to be ignored. All I had done was succeed in getting her angry with me. Hell, I even missed her snipe at Michael. Michael had been hired as my personal assistant right out of college about 2 years ago. Hiring her was one of the best decisions I made when I put my team together. I was a damned good architect, but my managerial skills needed a little help. She had the business and organizational skills I lacked and was the one who worked behind the scenes to keep the team running smoothly. Our skills complemented each other perfectly. If it hadn't been for her, I don't think my team would have been half as successful. Unfortunately, Michael had become another source of conflict between Andrew and me. Although she never came out and said it, Andrew had dropped enough hints to make me believe that she thought I had hired Michael strictly because of her looks. Michael was about 24 years old and was as cute as a button. She hit all my hot buttons and reminded me a lot of Andrew when we first married. Andrew had taken one look at Michael 2 years ago and instantly disliked her. In retrospect, it was obvious that Andrew felt threatened by the amount of time Michael and I spent together. But clueless old Adam missed the warning signs. All I saw was the contributions Michael made to the team. Sure, I spent a lot of time with her. She was my assistant. She was in and out of my office constantly and was a frequent companion on my visits to the building sites. She was the one who kept me on track. I never considered how it might have looked to Andrew. It might not have been an issue, but things had been strained between Andrew and me over the past year. We both had developed the unfortunate habit of ignoring subjects that would cause arguments. Instead, we let them fester. Andrew never accused me of cheating on her, but I think she had her suspicions. As for me, I stopped mentioning Michael to Andrew. I didn't want to give her a reason to get mad. The ironic thing was that I had no interest in Michael. If anything, she was like my little sister. I loved her enthusiasm and energy, but I had little in common with her, as had been made all too obvious during some of our conversations on longer rides. I won't say I didn't appreciate her beauty, but I didn't dwell on it. Besides, Andrew was the only woman I wanted or needed. I loved Andrew and had no desire to find someone else. Frankly, I thought guys who chased after young trophy wives were fools. I had some friends from the country club who dumped their wives only to turn up with a pneumatic doll on their arm. I just shook my head at their stupidity. I couldn't see the point. Even from a distance, I could see the mercenary glint in those girls' faces as they pumped their sugar daddy for all he was worth. As for me, I had a full life with Andrew. Even though we argued, we had a good partnership. I wasn't worried about her motivations. We both made a good living. We were together because we wanted to be. She was the one I wanted to grow old with. I finally finished up and sent the revised blueprints off to the contractor around 7 p.m. I stretched and turned off my computer. I walked out of the building with the rest of the team, all of us eager to make the most of our shortened evening. By now, I had completely forgotten about Andrew's phone call. I just wanted to get home and relax. Luckily, I missed most of the traffic and got home before 8 p.m. I was just in time to kiss my 9-year-old daughter, Amanda, goodnight as she headed up to her room. I peeked in on Stacy and gave a wave, seeing her glued to her phone. I shook my head in disbelief, 11 years old and already glued to her cell phone. I had just made myself a drink and settled onto the couch to unwind in front of the TV when Andrew came in and sat down on the armchair. Andrew looked over toward me, which was my first clue that relaxation was not on my agenda. She usually sat next to me on the couch so we could cuddle. The only time Andrew sat in the armchair was when she had something important to discuss. I sighed to myself and looked over at her. Her body language was hard to read. She was obviously nervous about something, but my late return had let her stew for a few hours, so she also exhibited some overtones of anger. "Adam," she began slowly, "I don't know how to make this any easier, so I'm just going to say it. I want a divorce." I was stunned. Even though we had some issues, I had no clue they had become this serious. "What?" I sputtered. "You can't be serious. What's going on?" Andrew dropped her eyes and wouldn't look at me. I sat there, staring at her, and of course, the first thing my mind did was examine my behavior to see what might have caused this. All I could think of was Michael. She must have finally decided that I was cheating on her. "Can we talk about this?" I pleaded, desperate. "I don't know what you think is happening, but we've been together for 14 years. Shouldn't we try to work things out?" She sighed. "I'm sorry, Adam. My mind is made up. Look, it's nothing you did. We've been drifting apart for years, and I think it would be best for both of us if we just moved on with our lives." After 14 years, I knew Andrew pretty well. From her body language, it was obvious that she was hiding something. I just didn't know what. I responded, more heatedly, "Maybe we aren't as close as we used to be, but that's something we could fix if we wanted to. What the hell is really bothering you? Do you think I'm running around on you or something? At my words, Andrew flushed and twisted her fingers together, her own guilt evident in every pore of her body. It was then that I realized what was really happening. Son of a witch, I thought. You're the one that's screwing around. You're leaving me for some other guy. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. I sat there, stunned, wondering what had gone wrong. Never in a million years would I have suspected Andrew of cheating. I was confused. A moment ago, I had been desperate to save my marriage. Now, I didn't know if I wanted to save it or if there was anything left to save. All I knew was that I was angry. Who is it? I grated out. I'm sorry, Adam, she said softly. It just happened. It really wasn't anything you did. He just swept me off my feet, and we want to be together. Who is it? I interrupted harshly. I didn't want to hear her excuses. Amanda Dyer MD, she whispered. Amanda Dyer MD was a loudmouth jerk who worked in securities sales at Andrew's firm. He had been there for about 4 years. I had met him and his wife a few times at company parties, and he was not someone I cared for. In my opinion, he was all flash and no substance. I didn't think he had a genuine bone in his body. Riley. You're leaving me for that scum bucket. I exclaimed in disbelief. I don't believe it. Wait, he's married too. You're destroying his marriage as well. Andrew stared at me for a moment, her guilt fighting with her anger at my crude attack. Finally, the anger won out, and she responded, Yes, Adam. Mark is leaving his wife too, and we're going to be together. I'm trying to be civil about this and not get into an argument, but you won't let me, will you? I want a divorce because I found someone else. Andrew's words hit home like a slap. My emotional outburst subsided, replaced by a cold, calculating rage. I dispassionately reviewed my alternatives. If I gave vent to my emotions and raged at her, it would accomplish nothing except to vent. It would be impossible for us to have a meaningful conversation. The alternative was to wall myself off and try to approach this as coldly as possible. I couldn't stand the emotional pain her revelations caused, so I needed to wall in my emotions. The only way I could deal with her was to shut her out. Fine. You want a divorce? You got it. It will save me the effort of doing it myself, I replied coldly. Her reaction to my words was curious. Even though she had done her best to push me away, my willingness to give in stung her. She was more conflicted than she was letting on. I could sense that on some level, she wasn't fully committed to the path she was taking. I sat there, musing for a few moments, half listening as Andrew started to mouth the usual platitudes used at a time like this. The nonsense people spout to let someone down gently. You know the routine, she didn't mean to hurt me, she still cares for me, she still wants us to be friends, all that happy horse crap. I had no interest in hearing it, and I don't think either of us really believed a word of it. So, I kind of zoned off into my own thoughts for a few minutes, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It was only natural that it took me a moment to come back into focus when she nervously moved on to a new topic. As I mentally reviewed what she had said, I was sure I had missed something important. What did you say? I asked incredulously. Andrew looked at me in exasperation. I said that we need to figure out what we're going to do. I know I sprung this on you suddenly, so I don't mind if you move into the guest room for a few days while you find a place to live. I couldn't believe it. Of all the nerve, she cheats on me, tells me she wants a divorce, and expects me to move out. It wasn't going to happen. What do you take me for, an idiot? I don't think so, I blurted out. I'm not going anywhere. Why should I leave? You're the one asking for the divorce, not me. Andrew looked stunned. I don't think she expected me to challenge her. I laughed bitterly and interrupted her. Did you honestly expect me to move out? Tell me, what was your plan? I mocked. Was Mark going to move in and take my place? The look Andrew gave told me I was close to the mark. Like hell, I grated. This is my house, and no asshole is coming in here to take my place. You want to leave me for him? Good riddance. I'm not going to stop you, but I haven't done anything to deserve this, and I'm not going to walk away with my tail between my legs. You're the one who screwed up this marriage, so you pay the price, not me. I glared at her, my rage beginning to resurface. Get the hell out. Go live with your damn boyfriend for all I care. As far as I'm concerned, you can get the hell out tonight. Andrew sputtered a moment in shock. But what about the kids? This is their home. I shook my head incredulously. What about the kids? Now you worry about the kids. I bet you thought about them a lot while you've been sneaking around on me. If I'm not going to allow some jerk to replace me in my house, do you think I'm going to allow you to replace me in their lives? Hell, he has 2 kids of his own that he just walked out on. I'm not going to allow him anywhere near my kids. I stared over at Andrew and told her in a cold, deliberate tone, if you want to take off with your lover, go. There's the door. But the kids stay here with me. You can visit them whenever you want, and maybe you can explain why you destroyed this marriage. I'll never stop you from seeing the kids, but I'm warning you, keep that jerk away from them. Equals certainly, here is the continuation from where we left off. Tell you what, Andrew, I'll give you a choice, just like you wanted to give me. You're welcome to the guest room if you want to stay here with the kids while we bring this train wreck to a conclusion. But it's not going to hurt me in the slightest if you get out of my life right now. Make no doubt about it, I'll be damned if I'm going to let you push me out of my house or away from my kids. That was the end of coherent conversation. She responded angrily, and we quickly degenerated into accusations, yelling, arguing, and name-calling. I was livid. I couldn't believe that Andrew thought so little of me that she could try to walk all over me like that. I don't know where it would have ended up if Stacy hadn't come downstairs to find out what was going on. Seeing her in the doorway, horrified at the sight of her parents engaged in a screaming match, was enough to throw cold water on both Andrew and me. I like to think that we were good parents, and one look at Stacy was enough to shift our focus. Regardless of our problems, one thing we could still agree on was a desire to avoid putting the kids into the middle of our private battleground. The only way to break up my fight with Andrew was to get away from her. So, with a mumbled comment to Andrew about finishing this later, I went over to Stacy and asked her to come upstairs with me so we could talk. If the girls were going to stay with me, it was up to me to break the news. I didn't trust Andrew not to tell them that they were moving out with her. Besides, I knew the news would hit them hard, and I wanted to tell them about the impending divorce as gently as I could. I led Stacy upstairs and saw Amanda cautiously peek her head out of her bedroom door. She obviously had heard our shouting too. I waved her over to join us as we went into Stacy's bedroom. I'm not going to go into detail about that conversation. Suffice it to say it was painful for all of us. I tried to walk a fine line. Despite my anger and harsh words downstairs, I knew the girls needed both parents to love them, so I tried hard not to demonize Andrew. I'm sure my anger at her slipped out at times, but I purposely avoided discussing exactly what caused the problem. There was plenty of time to discuss what happened at a future date. The last thing the girls needed at this time was to be forced to choose sides. So, when they pressed for details, I simply told them that Andrew and I were having problems we couldn't fix and were going to get a divorce. I tried hard to emphasize that they were not the cause of the problems and that we both still loved them. The girls took the news badly, just as I had expected. It was a shock to all of us, none of us saw it coming. When Stacy pressed me for reasons, I could only shake my head in confusion. I didn't want to tell them that Andrew had found someone else. I just left it at a comment that I was upset and as confused as they were. In the end, the girls cried themselves to the point of exhaustion, and I left them huddled together on Stacy's bed. I covered them with a blanket and made my weary way back downstairs. I was thankful that Andrew hadn't tried to insert herself into the meeting. She'd get her chance to talk to the girls later. With a heavy heart, I paused at the staircase landing. I dreaded going back into the living room. I didn't want to fight with Andrew anymore that night, but I knew we needed to discuss how our breakup would affect the girls. When I returned to the living room, I saw Andrew hastily putting away her cell phone. I assumed she had been talking to that jerk, Riley, telling him what had happened. It should have infuriated me, but at that moment, I was too exhausted to care. It was just another sign that the marriage was over. From the blotches around her eyes, it was obvious she had been crying too. She looked up at me apprehensively as I sat down, and it puzzled me for an instant before I understood. She was afraid of what I had told the girls. She thought I had told them about her affair with Riley. She was concerned that I had given in to my anger and had blamed her for everything. She thought I had taken the opportunity to turn the girls against her. I shook my head in disgust. Jesus Christ, Andrew, give me some credit. I might hate you right now, but you're their mother. They need both of us. I'm not going to try to turn the girls against you. My eyes glinted as I leaned forward. Let's set one ground rule now: we're getting divorced, not the kids. I don't want them dragged into the middle of this. I won't trash you to them, and I expect you to do the same. Let's keep this between the two of us and try to keep it as painless as possible for the kids. Andrew nodded gratefully. What did you tell them? I just said that we were having troubles and had decided to split up. If you want to tell them what really happened, then be my guest. I don't think they need to know right now, but if you want to confess, I'll leave it up to you. Just don't make me the villain. I grabbed the remnants of my watered-down drink and downed it quickly. I was tempted to get another. Hell, I was tempted to have a bunch, but drowning my sorrows wasn't my style. I rubbed my neck and looked over at her tiredly. I can't deal with this anymore tonight. All we'll do is get into another argument and wake the kids up. So, why don't you get what you need out of the bedroom now? I want to go to bed. I was surprised that I didn't get any more argument from Andrew. She slowly nodded and went upstairs. At that moment, I really didn't know or care if she was staying or leaving. She came down a few minutes later carrying a small bag. She looked at me sorrowfully. I'll call the girls tomorrow, and I'll let you know when I'm coming by to pick up a few more things. I'm going to go stay with a friend for a few days. I snorted. I assumed she was heading out to shack up with Riley. She looked like she wanted to say something but turned away and headed quietly out the door. As she opened it, I heard her murmur sadly, "Adam, I'm truly sorry." But she was gone before I could respond. I stared at the wall for a while, then went to my solitary bed to lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what had gone wrong with my life. The next few weeks were hell. To my chagrin, Andrew and I quickly fell into a pattern of sniping and bickering that threatened to spiral out of control. I guess it started the day after Andrew left. I had called into work to let them know I was taking a few personal days to deal with the crisis. My boss wasn't happy, but he understood where I was coming from. Ruth had gone through a horrendous divorce a few years earlier, which left him understandably bitter. He was a charter member of the Women Are Not to Be Trusted club and was eager to give me advice on how to take Andrew to the cleaners. He recommended a good, aggressive divorce attorney and suggested I take steps to protect my assets. The girls were surprised in the morning to find their mother wasn't there, but were mollified by her promise that she would call them. I assured them that we would discuss matters further after school. They wanted to stay home, but I knew I'd be busy, and I didn't want them sitting around, obsessing over the divorce, so I sent them to school, hoping they might be distracted. Just to be safe, I contacted the school guidance office to advise them of the situation. They recommended a counselor for the girls to meet with if necessary. Maybe I was naive. I never even considered that Andrew would try to snatch the girls from my custody. I just didn't think she had it in her. Luckily, it didn't occur to her either. She did pick up the girls from school, but only so she could talk to them. She even had the courtesy to call me to tell me what she'd done so I wouldn't get worried when they didn't get home on time. Still, I paced and worried until I saw her car pull up. I was feeling particularly uncharitable toward Andrew that day. I had learned some new information about what was going on, and I was livid. I'd received an unexpected visitor a few hours earlier, Mr. Darren Black, Mark's wife. She had come to expose her husband's sordid little affair with Andrew. Claire had been tracking them for about 3 months and had all sorts of evidence she wanted to show me. She had managed to get photos and even video of the two of them together. I took note but declined her offer to see everything. I didn't need to know every grisly detail or watch my wife in compromising situations with Amanda Dyer MD. The few photos she did share, showing them kissing, were enough to turn my stomach. I didn't need more evidence of Andrew's betrayal. The worst part, however, was something Claire hadn't said outright. From the beginning of her visit, Claire acted as if she expected I already knew about the affair. When I commented on this, she revealed that she had confronted Mark and Andrew the previous day during a lunch outing. She hadn't kicked him out, she had told him to get out. She also mentioned telling Andrew she would let me know about their affair. Andrew knew the jig was up, knew Claire had a copy of the evidence she'd pass along to me, and knew it would reach me as soon as possible. Claire's revelation floored me. Now I understood why Andrew had asked for the divorce out of the blue. She knew that Claire was going to tell me about her affair and wanted to gain the upper hand by dumping me before I found out. The dishonesty of her actions was unbelievable. It couldn't be viewed as anything but cold-hearted and deceptive. She had tried to manipulate me into leaving the house while hiding her guilt. The only thing that confused me was that it didn't seem to make sense. I had never considered Andrew to be this self-centered and conniving. I began to wonder if I had ever really known her at all. In any event, while anxiously awaiting Andrew to return with the girls, I made my decision. If she could act that callously toward me, I'd play hardball too. I'd live up to my promise not to involve the girls, but in all other respects, it would be all-out war. I decided to take Ruth's advice and make her pay in the divorce. In the meantime, I started looking for little ways to annoy and harass her, to pay her back for the aggravation she caused me. Most people have gone through a tough breakup at some point in life. You know how easy it is to succumb to the baser part of your nature and fall into an us versus them mentality, attacking your former partner in an attempt to ease the pain in your heart. You fight over things you don't care about just because you know it will piss the other side off. That's the pattern Andrew and I fell into. Every little attack or slight I aimed at Andrew was met with retaliation, and I countered her actions in kind. We weren't thinking, we were just reacting. After all, to do nothing might be seen as weakness. In any event, we were acting like the Hatfields and McCoys, and slowly but surely, our attacks on each other escalated. We were in a downward spiral, heading toward a disastrous contested divorce where everything would be fought over, starting with custody of the girls. That was when Emily stepped in. Emily was the one person I could always count on to support me and give me the advice I needed, whether I wanted to hear it or not. She was my twin sister. Technically, Emily was my cousin, but that didn't begin to do justice to our relationship. In our minds, we were twins with different mothers. To understand this, you need to know something about our parents. They're a living, breathing human interest story. To make a long story short, our mothers are identical twins who fell in love with, you guessed it, another pair of identical twins. Our parents took the twin thing to an extreme. Our moms and dads married in a joint ceremony, followed by a shared honeymoon. 9 months later, Emily and I were born. Our moms even managed to conceive at the same time and went into labor within minutes of each other. In my mind's eye, I can just see them in adjoining hospital beds, coordinating their contractions. Emily came first, and the doctor had just enough time to deliver her and cut the cord before he rushed over to catch me as I squirmed into the world. Emily has never let me forget that she's about 10 minutes older than me. For as long as I can remember, Emily has been a part of my life. Her family lived on the next street over, and our backyards abutted each other. In practice, we turned the backyard and 2 houses into a shared space. It was like having a second home and family. Her parents were like my parents, and vice versa. I'm pretty sure our moms switched off nursing us occasionally. It didn't bother me. I thought I was lucky to have 2 moms. Aunt Cindy and Uncle Rob, yes, I'm named for my uncle, just like Emily is named for my mom, always treated me like their own child. To this day, I still call Aunt Cindy Mom sometimes. She takes it as a compliment, and Uncle Rob doesn't mind either. Growing up, I had 4 parents and 2 homes. Now, before anyone gets the wrong idea, as far as I know, nothing inappropriate ever went on between our parents. There are always jokes about identical twins switching off, but trust me, even with identical twins, there are enough subtle differences for family members to tell them apart. We all knew who was who. Similarly, don't even think that Emily and I ever did anything together. Emily was my best friend and, in every important respect, my twin sister. We had that twin dynamic going full force. Kissing her would be like kissing a female version of myself. Incest and narcissism are not kinks I'm into. Throughout grade school and middle school, Emily and I were inseparable. We both took some teasing, but we stuck up for each other. I probably took more punches defending Emily than for any other reason, and she did the same for me. If a friend or classmate couldn't accept both of us, then they didn't get either of us. By high school, we had developed some different interests, but we still spent most of our time together. We ended up joining a loose group of friends who generally hung out together and had fun. It was nice to have someone watching my back and keeping me from doing something too stupid. Emily always kept an eye on me, and I was her protector. Our friends learned we didn't keep secrets from each other. If a boy liked Emily, all he needed to do was tell me, and I'd let her know. Same thing went for Emily. She hooked me up with most of my high school girlfriends. After high school, we went our separate ways. We talked about going to the same college, but our scholarship offers didn't align. Emily went to medical school, where she met her husband, William. They now work at a family practice in the next suburb from where I live. I still get together with Emily frequently and talk to her on the phone every day. She's still my closest confidant. To this day, she is closer to me than my own sister. Naturally, when everything hit the fan with Andrew, Emily was the first person I called. She commiserated with me and shared my anger at Andrew's betrayal. She also provided a counterpoint to Ruth's advice about going for Andrew's throat in the divorce. The defining moment came about 3 weeks after Andrew left. I had hired the lawyer Ruth suggested and met with him a few times to go over my priorities and concerns. If he was going to represent me, he needed to know that my primary concern was the girls. I wanted custody. I was sure this would be one of the biggest conflicts between Andrew and me. The prognosis wasn't good. The local courts were notorious for favoring mothers in custody disputes. It didn't matter if the father was active in the care of the children. If the mother was fit, she was usually awarded custody. The best I could hope for was generous visitation. The other option he gave me was to get nasty and drag Andrew through the mud. My only hope of winning custody was to paint her as an unfit mother. He suggested I sue for divorce based on the affair and present every bit of evidence Mr. Darren Black had gathered. The goal would be to show that Andrew's relationship with Riley put the girls at risk. He also wanted to argue that she abandoned the girls by leaving the household. In other words, my only chance at custody involved destroying Andrew's relationship with the girls. It was a sign of my desperation and mindset that I didn't reject his suggestion outright, but I told him I'd think about it. I was having lunch with Emily, gloomily telling her about his ideas. It wasn't that trashing Andrew sounded appealing. I was uncomfortable with it, but I didn't see a choice. I didn't want to get the girls involved, but my feud with Andrew had reached a point where I wanted to fight her on this, just because I knew she wanted custody. I wasn't thinking about what was right or wrong anymore, just about how to beat her. Thank God Emily was there to set me straight. Emily had heard all about my feud with Andrew. She'd listened to every grievance, big and small, and had heard every detail of how I'd paid Andrew back. But my consideration of a custody fight was the last straw. Emily was fed up. "Have you had enough yet?" she asked tartly, looking at me with annoyance. "What do you mean?" I replied, a bit defensively. "This vendetta of yours. Don't you think it's time for you to grow up and get over this petty childishness?" I couldn't help it. I put on my best whiny child's voice. "She started it." Emily groaned at my response and grinned in exasperation. "Oh no, not this time. You're not getting off the hook that easy. Look, Junior, I've sat here and heard you cry and moan for the last 3 weeks about Andrew and what she did to you. Well, it's time to grow up and get over it. Stop reacting and start thinking." It wasn't until that moment that I realized she was serious. I thought she was just joking around, trying to get my mind off my troubles. But Emily was looking at me with a stern expression I rarely saw. "Adam, I know you're angry and you're hurting. You have a right to be. I'm angry at Andrew, too. But for God's sake, don't let your emotions push you into a corner you can't get out of. I know it's hard, but you've got to think about the future, not the past." I must have looked confused because she continued softly, "Look, just because your marriage is toast doesn't mean you have to destroy each other in the divorce. It's not too late to change what your life will look like after the divorce is over. Think about it. How do you want to end up in a few years? Do you really want to be a bitter bastard like Ruth?" I shook my head uneasily. Ruth was lucky to see his son and daughter twice a year, and he was always complaining about the obstacles his ex threw up to make regular visitation nearly impossible. Emily must have seen the anguish on my face because she continued gently, "Do you want that to happen to you? Hell, would you really want to do that to Andrew, either? If you trash Andrew in the divorce the way that lawyer of yours is suggesting, the only guaranteed result is that someone is going to get hurt badly, and the most likely candidates are Amanda and Stacy. There's no way you'd be able to keep them from finding out what happened. A fight is going to force them to choose sides. They'll see you blaming Andrew for the divorce, and Andrew will retaliate, making you out to be the villain. There's a good chance they'll end up hating someone, and they'll be pawns in this little feud you have going. It's a no-win situation for everyone. She paused, letting that sink in, then said, when you told Andrew that first night that the girls needed both parents, that was the last smart thing you said. Can't you see what you're doing? This isn't just about you and her. What about Amanda and Stacy? They're going to need both of you in the future. I stared at Emily. She had hit my weak spot, and she knew it. Accusing me of hurting the kids was the one way to get my attention. Seeing my reaction, she nodded in satisfaction. She had given voice to the doubts I'd felt ever since I left the lawyer's office. So what do you want me to do? I asked miserably. Give up and let Andrew have custody and hope she'll give me visitation. It's a no-win situation. Emily shook her head. There's another choice, but that jerk lawyer of yours doesn't see it. All he knows how to do is fight and claw. William has a friend who asked if you had considered sharing custody. The courts will go for it if both parties are willing to work together. I think you and Andrew have a chance at cooperating, but it's got to start now. Call off the feud before it's too late, she urged. You need to take the first step and ask for a truce. Maybe if you and Andrew sit down and discuss things like adults, you can come up with a solution you both can tolerate. You both love those girls to death, and you're both great parents. If you two can manage to be civil to each other for a few hours, I think you can come to a solution. After all, the one thing you both agree on is the girls' welfare. If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for them. I mumbled a noncommittal response. Her idea gave me hope I hadn't had before, but I didn't want to get too excited until I knew if it was a real possibility. At the very least, it was worth a call to my lawyer to find out more about shared custody. Emily had given me a lot to think about, and I tried to shift the remainder of our conversation to something innocuous. But Emily wouldn't let me. She wasn't done meddling in my life just yet. She had just gotten up a full head of steam. By the way, Michael called the other day, she said, sounding slightly amused. She's worried about you. The girls are worried about you. Hell, even William is worried about you. When are you going to get your head out of your rear and stop moping around? You're getting divorced, so what? Deal with it. It's not the end of the world. You've got to get on with your life, Adam. She continued, focus on the future, not the past. Don't let this divorce turn you into a bitter wreck like Ruth, who can't trust anyone. Try to think of the bright side. The bright side. I interrupted morosely. Well, if you play your cards right, you'll end up better off than you can imagine, she stated bluntly. I looked at her, taken aback. She always found a way to shock and surprise me, but this one came from left field. Sure, when we were younger, we'd often talked about dating and relationships, and she'd supported me in my first attempts at understanding the opposite sex. In a way, she'd been my guide to the mysterious world of girls. She'd given me advice on how to attract and keep a girl's attention. But we stopped playing that game when we were about 15. Now she was giving me advice again. First, she'd given me a much-needed kick in the pants over the custody feud, and now she was giving me dating advice. Noting my expression, she smiled. I figured that would get your attention, she said dryly. You've got to look at this as an opportunity. How many divorcees and widows are there our age at the club? How many guys do you know who've thrown away perfectly good marriages for a young fling? They're all just waiting for you, Adam. She snorted in amusement. Hell, some of them are champing at the bit. As soon as word got out about your split with Andrew, a few of my friends asked me about you. Off the top of my head, I can name half a dozen women who would love to be there for you. I must have looked doubtful because she shook her head in exasperation. Don't you get it? A lot of these women are in the same boat you're in. Their husbands cheated or left them for someone younger. They're looking for someone they can relate to, someone who knows what they went through, someone they can trust. You're the answer to their dreams. You're trustworthy, might be in the market for a dependable woman, and you're not bad-looking, either. Give them half a chance, and they'll eat you up. I laughed, albeit bitterly. Right. I'm a sex god. That's why Andrew decided she needed Amanda Dyer MD, sure, Emily, and I bet all your friends are just laughing at the poor cuckolded fool. She just shook her head, amused. You're wrong in so many ways it's hard to know where to begin. She sighed theatrically. All right, let's start with what's clearly bothering you most, your pride. Is your ego really that fragile? Do you honestly think everyone's laughing at you because Andrew cheated on you? Get over it. Not only do they not care, but half of them know exactly what you're going through. They've probably gone through worse self-image issues than you ever will. Emily continued, her tone softening a bit. I hate to burst your bubble, but chances are, sex had nothing to do with why Andrew had her affair. Did Andrew ever complain about the sex? Unlike guys, most women don't have affairs just for variety. There's usually another reason that gets things rolling, and the physical part is a consequence, not the cause. So don't worry yourself over whether Andrew left you because of that. Then, to my surprise, she added, and for what it's worth, I'm almost positive you're better than a self-centered jerk like Riley. You may not be a sex god, but who says you have to be? The women you're going to be interested in are looking for more than that. They want someone nice, someone they can feel comfortable with, someone who sees them as a whole person and not just as an accessory. They want a little romance and someone to make them feel good about themselves. And you fit the bill on all counts. Emily went on intently, no one's going to think less of you because Andrew left. Hell, the hardest part might be keeping a date from turning into a trash the ex session. If you tell them about it, all they'll think is that Andrew was a fool for cheating on you and an even bigger fool for letting you go. And they'd be right, Emily stated bluntly. She's going to figure that out soon enough. Her pep talk raised my spirits a little, and I perked up at her last statement. She noticed and gave an evil little chuckle, leaning forward with a gleam in her eye. Think about it, Adam. Andrew was already jealous and suspicious just because you hired a young assistant. How's she going to deal with Riley, knowing that he's a slimeball who cheated on his wife? It's only a matter of time before he cheats on her too, and she knows it. She gave up everything for a pile of fool's gold. Emily leaned back, smirking. So, you don't have to make yourself miserable in the divorce to pay her back. If you really want to make her regret what she did, just go on with your life and be yourself. Be civil to her because you don't have anything to lose by doing it. You'll survive this divorce, maybe even have some fun with your life too. I took a few minutes to think in silence. Then, finally, I looked at her and nodded. All right, Emily, I hear what you're saying. I understand all the hard truths about keeping things civil and considering the girl's welfare. But there's something else that's bugging me, and I need to know what you think. She nodded, encouraging me to go on. What happens when the girls find out why we're getting divorced? What happens when they come to understand that their mother cheated on me? I paused, rephrasing it for clarity. I mean, what happens when they learn the truth about what she did to me and to our family? Emily fell silent, considering. But after a long pause, she finally said, they'll be hurt. They'll be angry. But they'll also understand that it wasn't because of them, and they'll know you both still love them. She sighed, continuing carefully, they're young now, Adam. When they're old enough, if they ask, tell them the truth. Just, don't make it a weapon. I looked at her, unconvinced. But Andrew didn't just cheat on me, she cheated on the father of her daughters. She walked out on our family. Doesn't she deserve what's coming to her? Isn't it fair that our family and friends know the truth about what happened? Emily held my gaze, a hint of sadness in her eyes. Look, I get that you're angry. But hate isn't the opposite of love, Adam. It's indifference. If you really want to move on and have a life after this, you need to let go of this bitterness. If you focus on your daughter's well-being instead of on getting revenge, they'll see who the better person is. She took a deep breath before adding, besides, do you really want your daughters to learn to hate their own mother? They need a parent who shows them stability and love, not resentment. If you play fair, they'll see Andrew's mistakes on their own in time. The best thing you can do is set a good example. Show them that love, family, and integrity matter more than getting back at someone. I could see her point, even if I wasn't ready to admit it out loud. The thought of just letting Andrew walk away without consequences gnawed at me, but I knew deep down that Emily was right. Focusing on my daughters and my future was the way forward. Emily gave me a hopeful smile. Thanks, Emily. I'll think about it. With a sly grin, she leaned in, and hey, don't rule out dating just yet. There are plenty of wonderful women out there who'd appreciate a decent guy. Give it a chance. I shook my head, chuckling despite myself. All right, Emily. I'll keep it in mind. A few days later, I met with my lawyer and told him I was interested in pursuing a joint custody arrangement. He was a little taken aback, clearly having expected a fight, but he agreed to draft a more cooperative proposal. He even softened a bit as he explained how this could streamline the process and minimize court involvement, especially since I wasn't interested in drawing the kids into a nasty legal battle. Knowing I was taking a step in the right direction gave me some relief, even though I still felt the sting of everything that had happened. The next day, I called Andrew and asked if we could sit down to discuss the divorce terms and custody arrangements. She sounded hesitant, but she agreed to meet for coffee at a nearby cafe. When we sat down, I started by saying that I wanted to keep things as smooth as possible for the girls. I explained that I thought a shared custody arrangement could work if we both stayed committed to keeping things civil and respectful around them. She seemed taken aback, perhaps expecting a more hostile approach. After a moment, she nodded, expressing some relief that we might avoid a prolonged fight. We discussed the specifics, who would have the girls on which days, how we'd handle holidays, and even how to approach explaining the situation to them over time. Despite the awkwardness and occasional tension, it was a productive conversation. After we hashed out the details, Andrew looked at me, her expression softer than I'd seen in weeks. "Thank you, Adam. I know this isn't easy for either of us, but I really believe this will be best for Amanda and Stacy." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of resignation and relief. Let's just do our best for them. That's all that matters. With the arrangements in place, the divorce proceedings went much more smoothly than I'd initially feared. Andrew and I managed to avoid the worst of the mudslinging, and the custody agreement we'd reached kept the girls as the priority. In the end, the court approved our joint custody, and we both retained shared access to the family home until we could work out the logistics of separate living arrangements. Months passed, and the new reality of shared custody set in. I started to adjust to life as a single father and found that the extra time I spent with Amanda and Stacy was surprisingly fulfilling. Despite the challenges, it felt good to focus on my role as their dad. Emily's words stuck with me, and I realized that setting a positive example was worth far more than any fleeting satisfaction revenge could offer. One evening, as I was tucking the girls into bed, Amanda looked up at me thoughtfully. "Daddy, will you always be here for us?" "Always," I said, smiling. "No matter what, you and Stacy come first." That moment, more than any legal victory, felt like the true reward for making peace with the past. Thank you for watching. What would you choose, revenge or rebuilding? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and see you next time.